Well, hello, all. Welcome to this end of a week of us talking about customs and traditions, cultures, all that great stuff that helps us fill out our tabletop RPG worlds. One of the things that really struck me about us talking about customs and cultures and things like that is that uh, there's such an infinite variety and manner in which we can use them that it's really hard to. I sometimes find myself thinking, at, and I always do this after at the end of all these live streams, that it's like, oh, why did I mention? Oh, I remember this thing, or why didn't I bring up? And then you fill in the blank, right? Because there's so many things that I think that we all think of from the simple act of saying, bless you when someone sneezes, or holding the door open for someone when they go through you know, into a door, or waving to someone and saying hello and such. Those very simple things are themselves a kind of a custom or culture, even if we don't remember their origins, we still do them because we have a new meaning for them even today. And sometimes we can even, much like what we talked about festivals, holiday celebrations, that their true intentions may have morphed over time. The same thing goes for customs and such, right? That where over in the beginning, it may have been something that was, extremely important for people to do. You know, the sneezing bless you, if I'm probably mistaken on this one, came from a period of time where people were literally dying from in a very contagious infectious disease that was spreading throughout the population, and people were dying by the handfuls, until it comes today where someone sneezes and you just, you want to be polite, you want to acknowledge the fact that maybe they're a little bit sick, and you're like, oh man, I know what that feels like to be a little bit sick. And it's just a normal thing today where where its importance isn't on the same level. Same thing can be done for many of our festivals, holidays, celebrations, and such. The biggest of which, and sometimes most contentious of which, especially at least that I know of in the Midwest and the States, is the idea of Christmas. And every year you have the same people that are like, it's too commercialized. That's not the real meaning of Christmas. There are people who don't believe in the same, religiously don't even believe in the whole Christ figure, and they still celebrate Christmas because, in a very generalized form, it has morphed into the season of giving, and there's nothing wrong with people giving things, even if they don't believe in the actual religion thereof. And if you look even further into the past, um, the date has changed. Different political systems that were controlled by religious institutions changed it around quite a bit. So over time, things morph. So cultures do the same thing. So what does that have to do with today? I went on a little ramble there. Today's Future Friday. And Future Friday, we like to talk from everything from modern day into the far future. Modern kind of being like Victorian England, if you want to consider that to be um, modern, all the way into the intergalactic far future, maybe even to the although I don't know how you would describe it, even into a time when we have iron kingdoms of the people who have lived a billion years, towards the cooling and the end of the life cycle of our own galaxy or something like that. And Palora says, because mince pies are the best. I don't know where you're going with that, Plura. Maybe you're distracted because you're having a nice meal. Oh, say that's why I celebrate Christmas. Yes. Um, there's any number of reasons. Thank you. There's any number of reasons why people engage in the cultures that they do. A lot of times it's because, or cultures or customs. Sometimes it's just being polite. Like, you have no vested interest in. Uh, I would have no vested interest in bowing to someone if I went to if that's a commonality in Japan, but I would do so if I'm there, when in Rome, right? Which a weird turn of phrase in terms of us talking about things, but to show your respect to others, you say or do or perform the actions, the customs, the cultures of that place. So yeah, Flores says, I'm not sure your geography is up to scratch. Thinking Rome is in Japan. Yeah, exactly. And I was thinking in my head, I was like, wait a minute. When in Rome, you're not in Japan, unless you're using some kind of like quantum entanglement or something. Um, so in terms of far future, whether we have left our own planet or we've left our galaxy, or we're colonizing, we're building Dyson spheres or something like of that nature. If you want to go that far into these K2, K3, K4 societies, I'm sure before we get way into that realm, there are going to be enough customs and cultures that are going to exist before we even get there. If you read enough science fiction, there are writers who will come up with some types of clothing, languages, behaviors, and such. I would say that the television show The Expanse, which I think has gotten a fifth season, I think. Yeah, I believe the CEO of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, has renewed it for a fifth season, because I believe it's one of his favorite shows and maybe book series, but which uses a lot of customs and cultures in terms of the people and the language. For example, back when, yeah, the Fremen. Ooh, Dune, the Fremen from Dune. A lot of cultural. Yeah, Polaris is the Fremen. A lot of cultural bits there. I think the simple act of that really caught me was the Fremen show respect to one of their own, or to people that they consider one of their own, or someone that has passed or died, either in battle or whatever, by spitting on the ground. Now, for those who don't know, the Fremen are the people who live out in the vast desert of the desert planet Dune, and they wear these like skin suits. You've seen them; they look like dark gray, bluish, purplish, black skin tight suits with the muscular structure and an externally looking muscular and arterial structure to them, which recycles your own body fluids and sweat. And with usually there's a little tube that goes into the mouth or up into the nose, and there you're able to, I guess, get a drip of bodily fluids over and over again. And one of the things out of respect, they will spit on the ground, because every ounce, every drop of fluid is very important. And it's, in many ways, it's like taking a bottle of alcohol and pouring out a drink for a lost loved one. Some people do that. They'll take a beer or alcohol or something, a shot. Some people will order a shot at a bar, or leave a space at a table with a plate and silverware and a empty glass for that individual as well. The same is done in the military with boots and their weapon and their helmet and satchel and their medals and such. So there are those things. Polaris says, I do love that little bit. I think it's so wonderful, the spitting thing. It's seen as a sign of total disgust in a lot of places, but it fits so well with the Fremen still suits. Yes, I'm absolutely with you, because it's a shock really to the system. One of my favorite versions of Dune was a low budget, I want to say it was between 5 to 8 hour television show. Lower budget, but I think it was one of the best renditions. I even remember the guild masters, and it's hard for me to describe this, but the guild masters that watched over the guild navigators talked very expansively with their hands. So they would hold their hands up like they were praying, and then it was almost like a mutant form of sign language when they talked. Um, yeah, yeah. There's a Plura says there's some bad Dune stuff with the wacky shields that came from the books though, with the wacky shields where it I the Hubbard was trying to come up with a way to have energy shields that would force people to have to fight in a medieval manner. So, oh yeah, yeah, the cubic shields were they weren't smooth. They didn't have curves to them. They were like cubic shields that surrounded the body, and um the more energetic it was, the greater the defense. Unless you blasted it with an energy weapon, in which case it would explode into like a nuclear or atomic blast or something. So if people were using energy shields, the enemy would stop using energy weapons because he would kill themselves as well as your enemies or something. It was something like that in the books. Anyway, it was an excuse to have people fight with swords and to do like more of a swords and psionics kind of thing. Tesla says in the TV miniseries they were form fitting. Yeah, and mind you, budget constraints. Right. It's one thing for us to come up with it in our minds, and for a concept artist like I've got this great idea, and the bean counters in the background like, yeah, no. How about we just say you have an energy shield and leave it at that? You know what I mean? So yeah, a lot of that is budget constraints and creativity and things of that nature. Um, Rotoscoping way back in the day. Plura says, like being a bloody pink ice cube. Yeah, exploding on the inside, just splatter up against the inside of your personal force shield, and then your body and powdered bone just slide down to the bottom of this human shaped energy shield till it runs out. Scott Poe, holla, yeah, holla. Plus, says they have the half shield things in the Harkonnen arenas. It's been a long time. I think they might have used the half shields, the medieval shields, but created by energy, if I'm not mistaken. Deadman says the Expanse had 3 seasons on Sci-Fi, and Bezos gas paid to further the series into 5 seasons. Sure did. And I'm happy for it. Now I haven't caught up on season 3 yet because it's one of these shows that I really have to like. I don't like being distracted watching it, but yes, absolutely. And so we will never stop creating new cultures and customs and traditions and behaviors, most of which will come about through accident. Whether it's through language, whether it's through hell, we abbreviate damn near everything, right? So some words and phrases will be just abbreviations of the things we're using all the time. All of us, if we are living in a extra-terran society where we've left the gravity well, things will start to change then. Hell, even in classic cyberpunk culture, language and such has gotten to the point where um, there's a lot of shorthand as well. Much of the 80s, William Gibson, George Alec Effinger, cyberpunk stuff that was written used there was a lot of languages pulled from, like, especially Japan and Latin American style language that was, and African words were mixed into slang because of the idea. The idea at that time, and maybe even today, was that at the time there were poorer third world countries, and the loss of power of governments primarily, and that power was given over to more corporate interests, which didn't have borders for themselves. So a lot of the, you got your ultra rich, and then you had to have the workers. So the workers came from many of the poorer countries, and then therefore their languages spread out, and then those people spread out. So in those books, you had a lot of mixed heritage people, mixed language, and stuff like that. Um, Pelora says, I've always wondered what music would be like in the future. There's a wonderful TED talk from Nerves drummer Jojo Mayer called "Exploring the Distance Between Zero and One." I'm probably the only one interested, but yeah, there you go. You know what? I don't disagree. I kind of take it a little further. Like, I wonder what entertainment would look like, because would we, especially when we have like AI helping to create music, would there be sound waves that we don't normally hear, but would affect us on a more primal level? Would we start to experience things not just in the typical goggles over the eyes, 3D, full immersion VR kind of thing, but will we combine that with drug therapies and interfacing in the computers, along with specific types of sound waves and other? I don't know. Would memetics become something that is perfected in the future? Memetic science being the idea that there are external sensory input that could dramatically affect our psychology. So, for example, there may be a tone of color when mixed with a certain phrase, combined with a certain scent, that could almost hypnotize us to get us to do a certain thing or feel a certain way. And we ourselves may not know what that sound or smell or phrase might be, but memetics would be able to study our habits and then come up with the thing that can affect us, to the point where it's almost hypnotic when we are exposed to it. And so maybe music, maybe there's a way for music to be personal for each person, rather than a song and then a million people hear the exact same song. Maybe there's some way for that song to morph a little bit for each person that hears it individually. I don't know. Plor says in some electronic music now they use bass frequencies that you can feel but not really hear. I I don't doubt that, especially if you have a high fidelity sound system where you can really feel the bass, but you don't hear the bass. I absolutely I can see that. I can see that being a thing. Um, there may even be certain types of maybe there's certain types of entertainment that require you to go through certain stages. So you hear a thing that puts you in a mind state that allows you to see a thing that then culminates into you interfacing into something to experience a thing, right? Not certain, but also maybe there will be certain kinds of greetings, simply by the typical spaceship decelerating, using some, shedding their delta V as they head towards a space habitat orbiting around Saturn or Alpha Centauri, and the greetings that you give when you get there. Do you have to? Oftentimes, the default is sending a signal that tells people what your ship, who owns the ship, who are you, why are you there, um, paying your docking fees before you get there, declaring the things that you're bringing there so you don't uh, essentially poison everyone else with your biology and such. Maybe they become, most of the time we see in these shows where you get off your spaceship and you just walk into the habitat. Maybe there's a little bit of a quarantine involved in that as well. Um, maybe there's the idea of giving of a gift whenever you arrive in a certain place. Maybe it's just a normal thing, whether that gift might be seeds for growing chocolate plants or a small pet or something. I don't know. Maybe there's just some genetic material that allows some of these very isolated communities to add some more randomized chaos into their genetic material, whether it's for people or plants or animals or something. Zevron08 says, I remember in Mass Effect, the race, the Asari, all female blue humanoids with tentacle crests for hair. Yep, I remember them. Lived for over 1,000 years and split their life into 3 periods. Moved a little bit. Maiden cycle to teenage, early adulthood, trying to figure out who you are. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll last a few hundred years. And then matron, settling down, having kids, and a steady career in the mid-hundreds. I feel like we would probably do something like that as our lifespans increase well beyond 100, 150, 200 years, that we might specifically pick age cycles, and we might identify ourselves as living in different cycles of our lifetimes if we don't physically look different. If you look the same age from, say, your early adulthood, like early 20s, to like your early 600s, and there's not really much of a physical change, but you're going through different periods of time, then I could imagine having maybe wearing or being tattooed or something with an identifier. Zev goes on to say, goes on to go from the early adulthood into matriarchs, political leaders, and helping communities for your last hundreds of years. I suppose after having all those experiences, it would make sense to be the person who has enough experiences to help out other communities. Scott says, quarantine for space herpes. Ice pirates. Yeah. There might be a lot of space herpes around. There are scientists, and we know that they are trying to figure out how we will live for extended periods of time in tight spaces. And we know that for the most part, most people go a little stir crazy, and trying to find the people that can live that long in close proximity to each other is very difficult. So I can't imagine what's going to happen when it comes to sexual interaction and gratification and stuff. We already have some examples in prison culture, and there are some of those examples in ancient cultures, like with Spartans and things like that. So I don't know. It could take a dark turn, or a you need to disinfect your spaceship kind of thing. I could imagine it. Pillar says, starship captains being obliged to carry some cargo from place to place if asked, assuming it doesn't go out of their way. Stopping off at one colony, someone finds out the captain is going to such and such and gives you something to take with you, like a hospitality sort of tradition. Yeah, it would be the space form of a maritime law, where it's always been a hospitality tradition to kind of like take someone's mail. Like, hey, on your way to so-and-so, can you take this thing, whether it's a message, a small object? Maybe I'm sure there's a cargo limit, but I could imagine even amongst enemies that if you're heading past a place, like, look, you're going to be within a light year. The minimum you can do is take this small package with you and drop it off, and maybe leave some kind of like signal or something, and leave it on an asteroid or whatever, even if you're not going to literally dock with their habitat. Yeah, I could see that being a thing. I really could see that being a thing where, even amongst enemies, a starship enters into some kind of like orbit and says, hey, I've got messages from these these other places, and so you have emissaries coming to collect them or grab them, space docking and grabbing those things, because that's what you do, because you want it's a quid pro quo, right? It's, you want them to do the same thing for you that you would do for them. So and with how difficult it would be in the beginning of society to go out into space, because you have to literally take everything with you or scavenge it where you get there, that the difficulty of getting new genetic material or having oxygen, water, food, um, material for your 3D printers, that kind of thing. So I'm with you on that. I'm with you. Um, Zev says, one of your party is an Asari who's 106, and she's considered a child or young teen by Asari standards. And she says she views your race as always rushing because they die so quickly. Anything that lives a very long time, you're going to have. That's always been the contention in Dungeons and Dragons, with like the lifespans of like elves and dwarves versus the humans. And although there's the you're rushing around and you have a short lifespan to the I admire them because they get so much done in such a short amount of time, and we sit around contemplating, Yeah. Yeah. Plur says, yeah, it's like, I mean, people live a comparatively long time. We outlive all our pets. Exactly. So, and also internally, you're not going to think about your own lifespans, but with an extremely long-lived race, their cultures wouldn't change at the same rate as humanity. So if 5 generations of humanity have lived and died versus one generation of one alien race, they may look at people like, I can't remember what you guys did. What was that, 3 generations ago? Was it 180 years ago? And you've changed your language already? Come on. I haven't learned the last slang, and you came up with like 6 different versions, permutations of it. So that's always been the problem with vampires. Vampires are still stuck in the Victorian age because they just learned what, I don't know, the Renaissance period of art was, and they've already gotten into modern day. So now some of the other things about having cultures and traditions are the us versus them mentality. For example, in 0G, you're probably not going to have people. Okay, this was something that William Gibson put in his books, where either people would not wear things that dangled, except possibly for their hair. So there was an equal amount of people being completely hairless or having long dreadlocks in space, because and mind you, this was cyberpunk, so this is more like the gravity well was basically space habitats, I believe, maybe a moon base, but not much further than that out into space. And of course, Earth was trash. Everyone wanted to go up the gravity well to live with the richer folks. But there were lots of people who, you have the rich folks and then you have the workers, and the workers were all the downtrodden, the brown people, the poorer people, and many of them were to accent themselves, they tattooed their skin with symbols and to identify what clans they belonged to. And it didn't matter, male, female, any combination thereof. Either you were completely bald or you had long hair. And the reason was that cutting hair in zero or light gravity clogs air systems. It clogs life support systems. So you would either have yourself become completely hairless, so you would never have to cut your hair, or you would let your hair grow and never cut it so that it wouldn't clog the life support systems, which was pretty interesting. And then, of course, over time, they had ways to clean the systems, but the cultural aspect of having your hair grow extremely long never ended. So you were born and you just never cut your hair. You might be 47 years old and you've never cut your hair. Zev says, I left this I left as far as 500 years ago. Where's King Theold? Dead? Oh God, what happened? Old age? He was only 90. Yeah. Yeah, there is that. There is the um time dilation. It's in a novel, time dilation and written or seen in books or television shows or movies is good. In gameplay, kind of sucks. Uh, and of course, you guys know time dilation, right? The faster you go, the the further you are separated from the passage of time for those who are not moving towards the speed of light. So you could travel to a planet, get there, perform some action, and come back at near light speeds, and it feels like only 3 years have passed, but 30 years or 300 years have passed when you get back. And of course, the problem with that, using that in a both novel form and tabletop role playing form, is every time the PCs leave somewhere, it changes. And as a world creator, setting creator, you're like, yeah, I'm not going to have 87 planets and literally have to accelerate their culture every single time the PCs leave orbit and go into like wormhole, hyperspace, sublunar. Sorry about Discord drops my audio in and out for some reason, so sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, Plur says just going over to the next system, everyone you know will be dead by the time you get back. Not literally. I don't know. Maybe depending on lifespans. But again, hey, I'm going to go to the next system. I'm going to have a meal. I'm going to come back, and whole political systems may have changed. A war could have started. A plague could have spread. The people that you left behind could have already left to go on and do their own things, and they might not be back when you get back home. They might not be back for another 500 years, and you may be dead after they're gone. So there's a whole big, like, it's a complication, both narratively and in a literary sense, that it's far easier just not to deal with it, which is why it doesn't exist. The same thing goes for light gravity and zero gravity when it comes to portraying them in mass media. It's a complicated thing, monetarily and visually, and it's what do you do? You hire 5 actors to be in a starship, and every time they arrive somewhere, you have to have new scripts, new backgrounds, new actors, a new storyline, something that they've never been attached to. Yeah. Deadman says Discord seems to drop audio when someone leaves. Maybe I don't. Yeah, but I'm not going anywhere. I wonder why it drops my audio, or unless maybe it's dropping my audio as someone pops it in and out. Kind of weird. But Plurus, I think it's usually best to pretend that isn't a thing in games, though. I know I would have a hard time with it. I know it exists, and I'm not doing it. I mean, listen, I get some people would love to experience it, but I believe it's just my impression that the practice of it would not be as fulfilling as the idea of doing it. It's much like it's the person. We see this even today, where someone's like, I'm doing a Kickstarter for a brand new sci-fi version of something, or there's a new science fiction game out there, and invariably someone's like, everyone asks, oh, what's the space combat system like? Can I play a pilot? And as cute as it is, in practice, the character who's the pilot ends up either A, they dominate the spotlight because everyone else is twiddling their thumbs. Mind you, this is if it's developed poorly, right? They either are the only one flying the craft and everyone's sitting there doing nothing, or everyone else is doing something and the pilot is doing nothing. So while in practice, not in practice, in theory, it sounds like a really cool thing. Like, what are you going to be? I'm going to be a bounty hunter. I'm going to be a space mage. I'm going to be a shapeshifter. I'm going to be an alien clone. And what are you going to be? I'm going to be the pilot. I'm going to be, and it sounds good on as a script, but it's terrible in practice when it comes to into an tabletop RPG. So I think the idea of time dilation, while it sounds cool, I think you could it there's would be very little for PCs to attach to, and I don't think you're going to get the emotional resonance that you would get from a book or like a novel or television show where the person comes back home and all their loved ones are ancient or dying or something like that, right? In a TV show, an actor's hired to cry. At the tabletop game, PCs are just going to be like, players, it's fine. Pillar says hard sci-fi is a slog. I think it's cute a little bit, but I don't want to need to have to learn astrophysics to follow the story. I will tell you, if you are a fan of GURPS, the GURPS rule system, GURPS Space has the math involved in measuring and calculating different types of gravity, measuring terminal velocities, and so many other things. If you really want to dive deep, GURPS actually has gamified the ability to measure everything from from re-entry speeds to leaving gravity wells to measuring acceleration and the speed at which you would be going based on the amount of power you have, the kind of power plant you have, the kind of acceleration you're doing, and then all that. P, you're so bad. Tessa Ranger says in Farscape, the pilot became part of the ship, which of course, yeah, but who wants to role play the part of the ship, right? It sounds cool until you can't leave the ship and you're stuck on the ship when all the PCs are doing all the cool things off the ship, right? I think in Farscape it was sweet. I loved it. I love the fact that the ship was a sentient being, but in a role-playing game, doesn't really work. Zev says, never be the guy that drives the ship, because if you're going to do it, you're going to do it well, which means you suck at everything else. I learned that the hard way in Star Wars. Yep. Like I said, you could play the pilot, but then that puts the onus on the game master, right? Like, okay, how much piloting do I add? Every time I don't have piloting actions, what happens to the PC? Do I keep having piloting actions and the other PCs are like, great, I want to hit things with my laser sword. When do I get to hit things with my laser sword, right? Pelor says, I hated running Star Wars and playing it. And I do like Star Wars a lot. Yeah, like for example, the idea of the practice of Force users having private duels while other things are going on. Yeah, that doesn't work in a tabletop RPG at all. It written word, scripts, movies, TV shows, animation. It's perfect. You get the music score. You get the people lighting their sabers. You get them fighting in my favorite devastating landscapes as things crumble around them, and they throw insults at each other as they're about to clash. And yeah, it looks good in extra media form. Tabletop game, it doesn't work that way. You roll initiative. Great. I'm the Force user. I'm going to light my sword and I'm going to confront my rival. And then another PC's the bounty hunter. Oh, what do I go first? I'm going to shoot the Dark Force user in the head with my super sniper skill that I have. Oh, roll, dice clink. Wow, you one shot at the bad guy. You just killed the momentum. Zevron says the older systems were not great. Puller is like the quote, who the hell cares the RPG? Come on now. There are some of us in the weeds, nerdy nerds that love some GURPS. I can't bring myself to play GURPS any longer. But I've got a ton of GURPS books. They have some of the best, some of the best material. But I feel you. I feel you right here. Zev says GURPS, the drunken. I can do that, cousin of RPGs. Yeah. Why'd you have to add in drunken? Vince, what's going on? Dead Man says FASA had gravity rules in BattleTech with changes in ranged weapons, lifting off of planets, etc. Now, I'm not saying you cannot gamify the harder aspects of science fiction, right? Gravity, radiation, re-entry, leaving orbit, acceleration, deceleration. I'm not saying you can't do those things. I'm saying that I'm saying that I think we have a difference between the practical application of it and the tabletop role-playing game version of it, right? So Vince says, just join YouTube Works again. Yeah, I had my internet fixed, which was one of the problems. And Dead Man gave me another way to solve another problem, which is I'm going to have to upgrade my computer for literally get a computer specific for streaming, because I don't believe I'm processing fast enough to get a signal out at the speed I need and the fidelity that I need to stream across multiple platforms. So yeah. Zevron says everyone had to be a Jedi or nobody was Jedi. The game did not support your laser gun allies taking pot shots at Sith from behind. Exactly. Exactly. That's why when you play Star Wars, you literally have to sit down and go, okay, either we're all playing Jedi and being Force users or nobody, because there's always that argument. Everyone's like, hey, let's play Space Raiders. I'll be a bounty hunter. I'll be a smuggler. I'll be an assassin. And you get the one character like, oh, I'm going to play a Sith Force user, and everyone's like, and you hear the music in the background like doom 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 doom, as everyone's just like face planting, like, here we go with the argument. Thanks, Zeb. Zeb's like, yeah, YouTube works 70% of the time. Pillar says, I like GURPS source books. I have fantasy, low tech, and magic. Cool bits, but the mechanics can go to hell. Say what you really mean. Vince Shines saying, I just listened to a podcast reviewing Space Master, and it has rules for creating solar systems with random tables realistically. Now, mind you, like, of course, we've already squirreled the hell out of this, because we're supposed to be talking about cultures and traditions and things like that. But yes, the practical applications of science fiction, in science fiction environments and hazards and the technical aspects of dealing with it are a lot different in tabletop games, because you want to simulate them. You don't want to do them realistically, unless you're playing with nothing but like math and science nerds, which is fine. If you find that group, I don't think many people want to start using like trigonometry and that kind of thing at the game table for finding out whether your PC can pilot a ship through an asteroid field. You know what I mean? Says, I love that about the internet. The speed of light can be slow as hell when it comes to data transmission. That's because of bouncing. You know what I mean? That I wish we had line of sight, but we don't. Plur says, see, I like that Numenera has 28-hour days. A culture for a 28-hour day. I even checked some of the maths, but translating that is a pain. Yeah, and mind you, it's much like the default of having interstellar worlds that are monocultures and mono environments, because the difficulty of describing a planet with far more than one environment and culture is so problematic that it gets to the point where you just hand wave and go, fine, it's a desert planet. Fine, it's a jungle planet. Fine, these people think this way, and you just wipe your hands of it like, that's it. These people are this way, done, easy, you know, the Star Wars, everyone wears the same outfit kind of thing, right? Star Trek, I saw, not Star Wars, the Star Trek idea that everyone wears the same outfit. Now, I will admit Star Wars, maybe not so much recently, but in the past had aliens of different sizes and shapes, the same aliens of different sizes, shapes, genders, performing different job functions, right? From being dancers to being assassins to being force users, right? You know, so which I thought was a lot more realistic, but whatever. Tesla, advanced or repetitive math is why spreadsheets were invented. Well, hell yeah. Yeah. Zev says, to be fair, realism is all well and good until it messes with the holy mandate, the rule of cool. I definitely agree with that. Plura says, yeah, accounting for life. Are you throwing up accounting gang signs? Because we don't approve of that kind of stuff over here. Oh, man. Zev says, I like the Spelljammer creation system more. Easier to quickly craft worlds on the fly and make sense of it. Plura's like, damn right. Yeah, I'm from that 4320.687. Oh, man. Oh, so let me stop. All right, Squirrel, got to say goodbye to you. See ya. Customs and cultures, traditions. All right, so we're out here, we're floating in space, and one cool thing to do, especially with isolated communities, is to hold on, I gotta say it correctly. Plura's like, yeah, go and drop some gross profit margin up in here. You know what I'm saying? Shit. Thank you, P. So one thing too is especially with extremely isolated communities, isolated meaning like they're living in their own space habitats or their own dome cities, or on the outside in a bubble on the outside of an asteroid field or something, is to, I don't know, have them inbred. Inbred, not necessarily genetically, but culturally, so that while you as a visitor are scratching your head like, why are these people doing these things? Over time, they themselves consider this to be a normal course of action. For example, I believe in I know I'm bringing up Eclipse Phase, but you know it's a drinking game. So in Eclipse Phase, I believe there is there are groups of people. I think there's a scum barge. The scum is an actual player profession, but anyway, or background. But anyway, the scum are people that float around on these like hodgepodge spacecraft and such. And one community doesn't understand, or they got rid of the idea of personal property. So it's nothing for people to walk into your personal space, because they don't quite have personal space, to take a thing and use it and give it to someone else who then has to take that thing to use it somewhere. So an example would be that no one owns private tools. They just go and take a tool from I don't want to say it's a pile, but probably a central location. Or if you borrow a tool, someone else knows you've got that, I don't know, electromagnetic spanner or whatever is in your back pocket, and they'll come by and tap you on the shoulder and say, hey dude, I need that. And they're like, yeah, go ahead. You're fine. It's like, thanks. I'll see you later on. Fine. Okay. Or you're sleeping in your bunk and someone walks in and reaches over your head and is like, I'm just going to borrow that Trideo because it's break time and I want to quickly get some entertainment or something. Or they may not even ask you. They're just going to reach over you, grab it, and walk away. Now, there might be some politeness involved in it, like, hey, I'm taking this movie. I'll see you later. But there is another thing when they come in and start dressing in your clothing and stuff in your private space. And the PCs, if the PCs come into the airlock and they're like, yay, we got here. Our ship is damaged. We've been injured. Thank you for taking us in. They're like, hey, good to see you. And someone walks up to one of the PCs and tries to take the gun off their hip, right? Or you know what I mean? Like it would be very strange and weird to live in a place where they don't have personal space or property. Now, there may be, you could go towards the opposite, where maybe some kind of plague or disease or neovirus has spread through a habitat so much that no one communicates with anyone directly. It's always through screens or through windows, and no one ever meets each other. Except, if you want to pass something from one person to another, you push it through like a pneumatic tube, and everyone lives in their own little space apartment. It might even be a relatively large space apartment, but much like one concept for the Kryptonians, Superman's Kryptonians, they really don't meet each other. And you're kind of weird if you want to have physical connection with someone else. And sure, we can meet in virtual reality, but yeah, I'm not going to get close to you because you're going to get me sick and kill me because you damn diseases you carry around on you all the time, which is actually a true thing. We carry lots of bacteria and parasites and things on our bodies, which, a habitat that's purely clean would become easily infected by us. So Zev says, I love the idea of aliens where they're super close and affectionate. So getting sick is seen as a bad thing and is to be hidden. So you don't want to infect the others or be seen as needed to be quarantined. Even if it's just a cold, you'd be ostracized for a few days, which it could be a possibility, right? Where the aliens are very used to like, what is the thing where in modern day where people dress up as furries and they get into a big pile and rub up against each other? What is that? Come on, dead man. I know you know this. I know you know this. But it's where it is also an orgy of sorts. But is it yiffing? That's it, yiffing. Thank you. Pelori, your mind. Wow. We've got to meet. That's what I was going to say. Why do you know this? See how I knew that he would know? But anyway, but you get my point, right? It's you could have a pile of aliens that are just used to like sleeping in a big giant pile of stuff. Or maybe the aliens are normally what we consider affectionate, but for them, they just love to rub their tentacles or their skin or fur over each other in a big pile because that's just what they do. It's nothing for them just to grab onto your body and like, slowly rub themselves or climb on top of you or something. And they don't think of it as an oddity. It could be a very normal social interaction. I suppose an equivalent could be most of the marsupial style creatures like orangutans and gorillas and bonobos and chimpanzees that go through each other's fur to get ticks and stuff out. But it could be a social cuddling kind of thing for safety or fear. Big spaces, open spaces. They don't want to be. It's a comfort thing where they gather together in these open rooms or something. I don't know, but I cuddle puddle. Yeah, dead man knows all. I've seen a cuddling thing where lonely people all get together for cuddles, which is when you're a social group. That is a possibility as well, where just regular old human beings have lived on a spacecraft or in a habitat or something, and maybe everyone is expected to be part of the cuddle puddle. And if you aren't, maybe everyone thinks there's something wrong with you. And you're like, I just want to be alone. And they're like, why? It's like, because you guys are too close and I'm not really feeling it. And they're like, there's something wrong with you. Why do you want to be alone? What, do you hate us? And maybe they just take it a little too far. Like maybe you need some psychological help. Which here's another thing as well. When you go into deep space, maybe the act of curing the things that bother us might itself be an economy and a cultural thing that people start to embrace later on. So, for example, maybe there's a way to insert a chip into your head to feel or embrace certain psychological, what we would consider psychological problems, where they are cured in the future. So maybe people's personalities, maybe they've genetically bred themselves or drugged or cultivated themselves to have a very neutral personality where there's no more, people don't fall on the far ends of the scope any longer. Everyone's kind of the same. They have kind of the same desires, the same interests. No one is very either extremely happy or sad any longer because it's dangerous in a small enclosed space. But maybe there's a black market, or there's a, much like ancient Japanese culture where if you were in a space to drink sake, you could express yourself in the most extreme ways in a safe space. Maybe there's like safe space places, safe space places. Ooh. Blah, 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 blah. And those safe spaces are for, you get to throw things against the wall and get enraged and like cuss and spit and everything, and everyone's just like, oh, they're just letting it out because they need to. I just saw a car underneath a pile of leaves. So somebody must have. Beggar's night coming in early. Oh man. Plur says, there's a group in the Solomon Isles where all the men sleep in the same room. Some were brought to the UK and given individual rooms and felt like they were being punished. Yes, that's a real thing, right? Or that could be a real thing. I could see that, especially when space is limited in an intergalactic kind of way. The International Space Station is a very tight space, and until we're able to design super large space stations and spacecraft and such, maybe that just becomes a norm. Even in the largest spaceships, everyone sleeps in the same room. That's like not a small car either. The SUV is almost entirely covered. That's a mission in and of itself. Just get enough leaves to cover the entire thing. Oh man, Plura's like, what happens when one of them has a nightmare? Maybe they all do. Maybe there's a sympathetic psychosis goes through a group of people. So if one person is traumatized by something, the others feel little bits and pieces of it, so that the trauma spreads through the group in one way or another. Much like a viral psychosis. That'd be kind of different. Pelor says the cloney people, Kaminoans from Star Wars, and very reserved, but they have incredibly elaborate dances to express emotion. I like that. Not much was known about the internal Kaminoan society. However, there was a dance known as a Nara, where Kaminoans would display their emotions, which was a rare sight. Because of their long history of isolation, Kaminoans were xenophobic against other life forms, but most just saw them as outwardly humble. They also showed great skill and care in their creations, but still treated them like a product. Someone could say that there could be people who are Vulcan-like from Star Trek, very, very pragmatic, very muted emotional responses, things of that nature. But internally, maybe there's a way for them to express themselves very vividly, like through magic and things like that. So Dead Man says there's something like that in Eclipse Phase as well that follows Solomon Isles. Says, hell, I would love that that the clones from Star Wars are all essentially the same person on a DNA level, but each has their own personality.
taking nicknames related to their skills or past missions, calling each other brothers. I like that.
Okay, Dad, I love you.
All right, baby, love you.
9:15, please.
Absolutely. All right. The culture of this show is that the heraldrix calls upon the end of the show, and so unlike other places and manners in which we engage in our social media, those who are unfamiliar may not be familiar with the idea of the heraldrix going off to work. So, guys, we've come upon the end of the hour. I do love the idea of clonal families as well. Like, would all the clones look similar but act different, or would they find comfort in looking and acting and dressing very similarly, whereas on a personal level maybe there's a built up resentment of always looking and acting and being the same. So there's like an underground or undercurrent of them wanting to be different, and they go out of their way to be different just for a short time, just a couple of hours, to come back into the fold again. I think that would be a great player character choice. If I ever make my own transhumanist role-playing game, and you know me, I'm always thinking of something like that, I'd probably incorporate something like that. Pillar says some of the names are from their trooper number, like fives, but it's certainly an interesting concept. Some people see them as machines, others as actual people. Yeah. Him and heavy. All right, guys. Thank you very much for joining me. There will be no changes to this channel, but I might add some additional streaming. Says, I love me some transhumanism. Give me some computer parts. Like up inside you? I'm feeling you on that. I am a futurist at heart. I'm hoping that the future comes to the point where some of the things we hold dear disappear. So yeah, I am a futurist. I don't mind change. I love it. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for spending time with me. Your time is valuable. I hope I am able to, in a very small way, give some change back. So everyone, take care. I'll see you later. Bye.